Hello, everybody. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. We're talking recruiting here. Our weekly, now that the holidays are over, we'll get back in the swing weekly recruiting chat. I'm joined by John Davis and Brandon Speck. JD, I know you were on the phone. I got a story to tell right out of the gates. But before we get there, I wanted to ask you, man, just bring us up to date on where we are in terms of just the recruiting calendar. We're still in the dead period, but for how much longer?
Well, the dead period goes through the 15th. So next weekend, schools will be able to bring in kids from an official visit standpoint, open things up from a contact standpoint. So everything clears out. They've kind of based everything around the championship game. This was the second year that they had this longer break, the dead period, and I don't know if coaches like it or not. I don't know if I've really done enough to comment. I know when I was on Rebel Yell Hotline with Chuck, we had Yancey on. He said he didn't like it from a media standpoint. I guess because you're just not having any information, or the information kind of dries up more so. I think the biggest point that came out of there during that discussion about it, and it makes a lot of sense as you think about it, is what it does is it with so many more kids committing earlier, and then just you being ahead of the game with a class or two ahead, it really goes back to relationships. And if you are a new staff, like in Michigan's case, or use another school that's just got a new coach, new coordinators, like in Georgia's case or Florida's case, the relationships aren't there. So it really hurts you with this longer dead period, because your ability to bring in kids shrink that much more.
Well, I know, JD, as you and I made our way to Lexington for basketball earlier this week, we talked a lot of recruiting, some positions of need for Ole Miss. I want to hit that in just a second. I know you were on the line a few minutes ago with the coach of a possible offensive line prospect. We'll talk about that. Before we get there, Brandon wanted to ask you a little bit off topic, off football, but basketball. A high school player from Northeast Mississippi, very known in our area, Kenny Paulino, when he was a star at Boonville. He's broken a hand. Give us a little update on Gino there. How is he figuring in for Georgia this year as a sophomore? I know he's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks now.
He was playing 9-10 minutes a game, getting some playing time. He's kind of stuck back in the rotation a little bit. They've got some guys at his spot, but he's definitely getting his playing time. He's 9-10 minutes for a sophomore is okay, and he's scoring 3, 4, 5 points a game and getting some rebounds. But they trust him a little bit, and I think he was getting even better until that happened. So he's out 4 to 6 weeks, like you said. And it's just a setback, but I think it's his first real injury. But he'll bounce back, and that I guess their rotation has kind of put him in a spot where he's had trouble breaking through, because he got a lot of guys that were ahead of him when he got there. So, but he was getting some productive time, and obviously this is a setback for him.
Well, I know his playing time was sporadic last year as a freshman. Had a really nice game against Mississippi State in Humphrey Coliseum, and I saw him later in Athens, and he played a little bit. He was a hustler. I mean, you could tell that even as a freshman. So a little disappointing to see a setback for him when it looks like things were kind of taking off for him a little bit. But anyway, that's Kenny Paulino. JD, tell us a little bit about who you're on the phone with. I know Ole Miss is really trying to build its offensive line, has been for several years. Got a couple of key commits right now in Javon Patterson and Drew Richmond.
Right.
These guys, in all likelihood, are going to have to play some key minutes next year. It looks like the Rebels really need to get better there in some fashion, through some form. They need to improve along the offensive line. Tell us who you were talking with a few minutes ago.
Well, I was talking with Matt Meekins, who is the interim coach at Westfield High School in Houston, Texas. His brother just took a job at the University of Houston. Of course, they've got a Coach Herman coming in from Ohio State, so new staff changes there. He had a very successful career high school-wise, and his brother has moved on. And he is was the associate head coach. He's interim head coach and running backs coach. And the long and short of it is I was getting assessment review, profile information that I typically have started to do on the blog. If people have been following that, kind of what
Very
I call
successful on the blog. A lot of hits there.
well, and I call it know your recruit, know the guy that Ole Miss is recruiting, and the coaches give the best perspective for that, and so that's what this phone call was about. Again, I didn't realize that his brother had taken the job. In fact, he just got hired 2 days ago, and so I was able to. He was very nice and very helpful to give me 15 minutes, and what a great perspective on his part. As the running backs coach, to have a guy like Toby Weathersby, who is the recruit that Ole Miss is after, along with Arkansas and LSU. This is an Under Armour All-American offensive tackle, a guy that is a 6'6", 285-pound masher, but very athletic. A guy that is in the 15 minutes that I talked with the coach, sounds like a kid that is a leader on the field as well as a leader in the classroom. They have a requirement in the state of Texas. You have to have a 92 or better to be on the all-district academic team, and that's what Toby was able to garner. So, great grades, great offensive lineman. Like I said, I had the coach talk about the Under Armour experience with me. Said that Toby really enjoyed himself down in Orlando and getting to know the NFL coaches, and I don't know which one he had without me looking at the roster, but just a great experience to play in that Under Armour All-American game. And, Ole Miss is looking to get one more offensive lineman. I think there's no doubt if they could get Toby Weathersby, not only would that give them 5 offensive lineman commitments, that would give them 3 top-rated offensive guys in Richmond, Patterson, and Weathersby. And Patterson, which I put on the blog as well last night, was given a 5th star by 24/7 Sports. He is now regarded as the 32nd best prospect in the entire nation and the top offensive guard. So you could potentially have the best guard, one of the better tackles from Memphis in the nation in Drew Richmond, and then one of the best offensive tackles and the Lombardi winner from the city of Houston and Toby Weathersby. And that would be serving needs, but also getting you a lot of talent on the offensive line as well.
Let's talk about Javon Patterson a little bit. Brandon, as a Mississippi prospect here in Patterson, Rivals rates him, the 247 gives him a 5th star. He just now gets a 5th star there. Rivals rates him the number 3 player at his position in the country, the number 1 player in Mississippi. Should that add up to a 5th star there? He's also a 4-star recruit for Scout, 4-star recruit for Scout and Rivals. Are the stars adding up on Javon Patterson?
I think so, and by reading everything from the All-Star game, there was no better lineman in either the Under Armour or either game. So I think we get that 5th one. He's a guy, and JD has said this time and time again. JD has been high on Patterson, and you actually went to the commitment, didn't you, JD?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you've been high on him for a long time, and I'm with you. I think he's fantastic. I think he is the best OL in the state.
Is he the best player in the state? Is he the best overall prospect in Mississippi?
I don't know, JD. I mean, I'm a Leo Lewis guy, so
yeah.
I kind of stick with him. But I think you can make an argument.
Oh, I think that's the best way to put it, Brandon. I mean, I think it's tough for me personally to say he is the best player because I think he's the best lineman, and I put a lot of stock in offensive linemen. But at the same time, Jamal Peters, Leo Lewis, and there's a few other guys that also make a lot of plays and have had a lot of success this past year. And you could make a case for them to be the best, athlete or the best whatever. I'm big on offensive lineman. I think he's the best offensive lineman. So which means, with offense and defensive line being a premium still in this college game, if he's not the best, he's no worse than second or third. And I absolutely think he is. I know that I would put him first just because I think Ole Miss or just any team would love to have a guy as athletic as he is, offensive lineman. If he wasn't as dominating as he was, I could live with Leo. Peters or even a couple other candidates being a little higher than him, but I think because he's such a dominating offensive lineman and because offensive line is so important, I'd put him at the top this year.
Well, I tell you what, having seen Jamal Peters in the championship games down there in Starkville, I mean, what a player. I mean, and you talk about, I use the phrase a lot, looks the part, because that's what you're looking at, and that's how you're judging these guys until they get on the field in the SEC and start making plays. Jamal Peters looks the part, very athletic, very strong and physical, so a great talent there. Everybody wants these offensive linemen. You have to have offensive linemen. You need more than one to really build a strong, dominant, cohesive unit. But for terms of this discussion, it's really hard because the offensive linemen don't have those measurables. You're really looking at height, weight, looking at footwork and things like that. But you don't see touchdown passes, interceptions, forced fumbles, sacks, things like that. It's really hard to include them in this discussion. A lot of times you rely on the opinions of scouts and how they're evaluated by maybe college recruiting people or NFL people or what have you. But it's hard to include offensive linemen in this discussion. So when you see someone that is evaluated somewhere, and let's use Javon Patterson. You see a guy like that rated the #1 player in Mississippi. That just, to me, that really elevates him in the discussion. That's a new kind of praise for him, that you can take him out of the offensive line group and say, look, this guy's the best player.
Well, all three of those guys we're talking about, Richmond and Patterson and Leo Lewis, were all named Max Preps All-Americans. So a lot of people think highly of all three of those guys, and it's just all three, anyway you look at, are big gets, and they're getting rewards. And, again, with the stars, I think Patrick Willis was a 2-star. So, it is what it is.
Yeah, Houston would like to tell us that Darren McFadden was a 2-star.
Well, I was gonna add this real quick about stars, and I'm still trying to figure out. I think it's got to be a column. Recruiting column that I write here down the road, but in that Friday media op with Gary Patterson that we had Parrish over in Atlanta, I will never forget this moving forward. He said, look, our entire roster, for the most part, are 2- and 3-star guys that came in with a chip on their shoulder, and they started to play like 4- and 5-star guys because they didn't want to back down from anybody. He said you could get all the 4- and 5-star players you want, but if they don't play with a chip on their shoulder and play like 4- and 5-star guys, it doesn't do you any good. He said our recruiting rankings have been in the 40s. This is just our second full year to recruit to the Big 12. We want to get better players, but he said it doesn't matter how good a player I get. If they don't come and work hard and play like it when it comes Saturday, it does me no good. So
I got you. Now, the most important thing here is not the stars.
Right.
The most important thing is the player development, how they're coached once they get to their campus, and the player's work ethic. How hard do they want to work? Are they going to play like they have a chip on that shoulder? But I always go back to this now. You see the money that is spent covering football recruiting right now. And if somebody's going to invest that kind of money and evaluate these players, typically you'd rather have the stars than not. You're going to have success stories, man. You're going to have guys like Darren McFadden, Patrick Willis, who are going to rise above their recruiting coverage, so to speak. But, as a rule, it's going to be, you're not going to miss too often when you're signing these 4- and 5-star talents. Some of them are going to be a bust. You're going to see that, and we can all reach back and find examples of highly rated players that didn't pan out for whatever reason. I remember the year Houston Nutt was so excited to sign his 3 tailbacks, Enrique Davis. I'm forgetting JD, the guy from San Antonio, that Devin Thomas, Enrique Davis, Devin Thomas, and Brandon Bolden. Brandon Bolden was the most lightly regarded of that group, but he turned out to be the best of the 3 at Ole Miss and is now having an NFL career. So, you're going to have guys who play above their recruiting coverage, but with all of the money that is invested in ranking and evaluating these high school football players today, I think as a rule, you're going to benefit to have the stars, to sign the guys with the stars. That's, there's a reason that Alabama continues to win every year, and while coaching is obviously a big part of that, so is recruiting. And you look at their where they are in the recruiting rankings every year. There's something to be said for signing the guys with stars.
Well, and also sometimes you might have to get some of those 4- and 5-star guys to get some of the 2-star guys that rise above their stars. I mean, those guys see the big guys coming. Everybody looks at those guys. That's the guys we talk about. And sometimes some of those blue-collar guys that kind of rise above their rating, you won't get them unless you do get the guys that they follow in. So I think that's a good point.
I will add this too: 4- and 5-star guys are what you want, especially if you've got the ability, coaching staff-wise and strength and conditioning-wise, to get the most out of them. Those guys are going to have the greatest potential, and then it comes down to how you deal with them once they get on campus. But you do want them here, and it's so important just from a practice squad standpoint. I mean, this team, Ole Miss, specifically speaking, wins 9 games in large part because of the way they worked out and all that, but also in the way that they continue to train during the year through practice squad. As you remember, Parrish, the talk about Dale Harris and guys like Stringfellow making guys like Sinquez Golson better. The different practice situations that you saw there, because these guys were higher recruited and highly thought of, and because there was a competition level now increased, they all made each other better. And I think that's the other thing that you want with recruiting. If that 5-star guy doesn't maybe turn out to be what you would consider a 5-star guy, if he's at least giving you something like that scenario, that's a hidden kind of gem that sometimes is lost with recruiting, and that I like to talk about as well, because I think there's so many facets and so many layers to this. It's not even just what you do on the field; it's what you do for the team. At times like this, when it's 11 degrees and you had to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and get to a workout, those are the situations that are going to define you as a football program, and potentially rise State and Ole Miss better than what they've done. If they got everybody out for workouts at 11 degrees at 5:30 in the morning, they're probably going to have a greater chance of winning games as opposed to not.
Okay, the Under Armour game and the Army All-America game, both in the rearview mirror now. Who stood out to you guys? I mean, who shined? Who were the best storylines at these games? Brandon, let's start with you.
Kind of touched it earlier, but Patterson. I mean, I just think a guy like that shows what he shows, and just kind of is what he is, I guess, for to use a cliche term. But I think Javon Patterson.
Well, let's see. From an Ole Miss standpoint, if he's just a recruit now, I thought Lodge played pretty well that I saw. Help me out, Brandon, if you know. 6 catches, 5 or 6 catches he made.
Yeah, I think it was 6.
6 catches. I thought he looked good. I thought he looked really good. A guy. Don't beat me up, Ole Miss fans, for saying this name. A guy that they were recruiting heavily. He ended up picking Tennessee that I thought played really well was Kyle Phillips. That would have been a great get. Somebody that we interviewed. Brandon was with me in Hoover when we talked to Kyle Phillips. He had a great the Army All-American Bowl. Unfortunately, he chose Tennessee and is now at school there. I know Patterson. It was harder for me to watch offensive linemen because I didn't just sit there and watch 3 straight hours of the games. I was unfortunately having to move around and do other things, so I only watched snippets and pieces of it. I didn't get to sit there and just watch Patterson play after play after play. But I know, like Brandon said in the practices, he had a great, just absolute great review of all the games. All the analysts at Rivals said that he was clear-cut best one there. I'm trying to think for State. I know Fletcher Adams had some great practices leading up to the Semper Fidelis Bowl that was played out in California that Eric Sweeney, running back commitment for Ole Miss, played in. I don't know what his tackles end up being, but I know Fletcher Adams had a good game and good practices leading up to it.
And the practices really are just more important than the game here. Let's be honest. It looks nice in your recruiting bio if you can say, had 5 catches and a touchdown in the All-Star game. But you go and you turn some heads with these scouts in the drills. That's when you get more attention. That's when you're looking. Now, the game's going to show you. It'll show you some savvy. It'll show you, how you respond in certain situations, how you respond to the unexpected. But I think as these all-star games come about, and they're the days of practice leading into them, just like the Senior Bowl at the college level at the other end of their careers, you go out there and you perform in front of these scouts. I think that's where the heavy lifting is done in terms of the individual evaluations.
Speaking of Fletcher Adams, you asked a couple weeks ago would there be like a signing day drama, I guess. My buddy Riley Blevins this morning has said that Fletcher Adams is now 85% committed to Mississippi State and has his visit set up to Ole Miss and Georgia. So, speaking of Fletcher Adams, if there's a guy who's going to make it interesting on signing day, that could be the guy.
Hey, well, a whole lot can happen in 15%.
Yeah. I'm thinking to myself, where do they get the percentages? Like, I can see 100%. Like, I'm in. Yeah. Okay, that's 100%. Now, what is 85? Is that like I'm in? But like, I mean, does your voice go up when you say 85%? I mean, I don't. I've never. It is just an arbitrary number that I guess the kids throw out. It sounds good, I guess, to the fans that really want them there, one way or the other. I'll go back to Adams again. He was another kid that Brandon and I saw at the Hoover 7-on-7 stuff. We talked to him. At that time, he had yet to make a decision. He was coming up to Ole Miss early on in the football practice season. He did. I had always been calling Ole Miss. It seemed like he was just always around Ole Miss, always talking a lot about Ole Miss. Now his brother obviously goes to Mississippi State. And I'm not surprised that he picked State. It seemed like Ole Miss had a really good chance. And now as we've come another 4 or 5 months, and we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, there's still a chance for Ole Miss to be there. And they need defensive linemen. They definitely would like to get one more defensive lineman, defensive end for sure. And that would be a big get for Ole Miss to finish out with Fletcher Adams, because not only do you serve a need, you also hurt your biggest competition in state with him not going there.
Well, you know what? If he were to attend Ole Miss, it wouldn't be the first house in Mississippi that had one at Ole Miss and one at State. It might be a little unusual when you got football players like that, but you see the house divided thing going on all the time. Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk wide receivers, JD. We were talking a little bit about Van Jefferson on the way up to Lexington. This is the Brentwood, Tennessee athlete. He's been 50-50, he says, between Ole Miss and Georgia. Considers himself a Georgia commit. Now in some comments to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, he wouldn't call it 50-50 between Ole Miss and Georgia, but he in essence said it was too close to call. I mean, this kid is like all over the map, okay, because now he's no longer going to be an early enrollee, but he's going to take visits, it looks like, to Florida and Oklahoma. And, one of the things he said that was a cause for concern with him with Georgia was the fact that Georgia was in flux at offensive coordinator. That has since changed. They've hired Brian Schottenheimer, okay? But he's going to take a visit to Oklahoma that just fired an offensive coordinator or two.
Right, and they're just hiring guys. They fired Norvell and Heupel. There's one or two of these every year. Floyd Raven, back when Houston was here, that was a bizarre one. Alex Collins that signed with Arkansas, he had a bizarre one when his mom wanted him to go to Miami. And I mean, you see these every year. Now, I'm not saying Van Jefferson is in the bizarre category, but he is obviously in the what's going on situation. Look, it was kind of clear cut to me he was going to make a decision between Ole Miss and Georgia and enroll early. And I think at the end of the day, because Georgia, with Coach Bobo leaving for Colorado State to become head coach, I think at the end of the day he decided to not pull the trigger on Georgia. I think he was been leaning to Georgia until that came, and it was close. He was probably almost out the door. If you read the interview, like you said in the Journal-Constitution, he even said he had a bag or two packed. And the idea that he's taken a couple math classes now in school, It's evident he could have done that and gotten by. It really is a situation of like a cold feet at the aisle. I don't know for sure yet. Now they've got an offensive coordinator. What the relationship with Schottenheimer going to be, we don't know. I still think Ole Miss is in good shape here because Maurice Harris, his direct recruiter, and all the offensive staff at Ole Miss are still here. He's even talked about potentially coming back on an unofficial visit, and that weekend would be the January 23rd, 24th weekend where everybody and their brother is going to be here in Oxford, kind of like you've seen the last couple of years where they've had one really big weekend and all the guys that are currently committed kind of do their job, do their part on top of rolling out the red carpet. So I think Ole Miss is still in fine position. The Oklahoma deal, the potentially going to Florida. Did you hear me tell you that his dad was from Jacksonville,
Right.
Paris?
Right.
That and that's not shocking either. His dad was the defense or the wide receivers coach at the Detroit Lions. He considered himself a Michigan guy, but with his father growing up in Jacksonville, I could see why he's maybe looking at Florida as a hometown possibility. I'm sure Florida, with them needing offensive skill guys to get better there, they're probably going to sell them the moon. I'm sure it's one of those situations where let's test the waters, let's see what Georgia hires, and then make our final decision. No real rush. And again, if you're Ole Miss, you're still probably in good position because nothing has changed in your category.
Okay, Brandon, last word. Give us the top three guys in Northeast Mississippi, regardless of where they might sign, whether it's JUCO, Division II. Who are the best prospects coming out of Northeast Mississippi this year?
I still think Ralph Leonard at Starkville receiver. I think he's fantastic. I've been on his boat for a while. It looks like he's going to end up Florida Atlantic International. I think Florida Atlantic maybe was where he might end up. But I think he's an SEC guy. I think another guy to keep a watch on who I think is going to probably end up at East Mississippi is Soutel's running back, Diamante Pounds, big bruising fullback. I think he could help the teams, particularly Mississippi State, if they pull the trigger on him. But I think he's going JUCO for at least a year. And the third guy, I think Brighton Sykes, Kansas City.
Brighton Sykes, I've seen you write about him a lot. Let's talk about Pounds a little bit. Let's go back to him. Just a phenomenal high school career. What's held him back from getting a bigger offer? Is there a grades thing here?
Yeah, I think qualifying. I think it probably would have happened. I think qualifying is a problem. I don't think it's bad, but it's not what they want to see. So I think he goes JUCO for at least a year.
Folks, that's it for this edition of the Lunchtime Recruiting Chat. We will be back next week. Make sure you come back and join us. Thanks a lot.